the waterfront was lethal. I don't care where it was. Probably there was thousands of men died on the waterfront at Evansville because it's all on a slope. A wagon gets loose, a barrel starts to roll, and you're dead. You know, there's no defense. The ice, all of the things that was coming down towards the river here made that a lethal life. And no telling how many hundreds and thousands of men died at their work over 100, 150 years in that place. This is my favorite picture. This is Evansville. It was the Victory Brothers Grocers, and I'm not sure where the Victory Brothers was, but this was a counter card. You know, they'd make this, they'd take the picture and put it on the counter. You could come in and get 50 cents worth, a gallon of milk or what have you, and you get a card. It was said in the newspaper that the ice jam was 6 stories high, and I believe that. If you take a scale and just say you take that guy right there, and you say he's 5'9" or call him 6 foot, and you come down here, 2, 3, 4, down like that to the water level, you'll see that's about 60 feet. That's impossible. But I'll show you why this used to happen. This is Evansville. Here's Henderson. This is the Ohio River. See this that's the only place on the Ohio. The Mississippi has a lot of bends like this, maybe not that sharp. This is enormously sharp. And when the ice started coming down, it would jam up, get thick, really thick. And a lot of times it would look just like this. The problem with this was there was no drinking water. That ice replaced all of the river water. It was dry. The water would shortcut from this channel over to here. Can you see the marks it left? And for about 150 years, Evansville has always been concerned that the river would shortcut and make a path through here, and the Corps comes down and they look at it and they say, not yet. Now, someday it will. And of course, you know, it's been 150 years. They've been looking feared of this. But someday it will, and of course the Corps will come down and probably put great concrete structures to keep it from happening. So it will threaten, it'll try, it'll keep on trying, but it never will. How do you fight fires when you got no water? Well, what do you drink? If you're wealthy and you had plenty of firewood, you could bring the ice chunks in and melt it and have that for your coffee or your tea or just to drink. See the problems that they had. Early life was not you know, we think of it as pleasant and all of that. No, be glad you live when and where you live today. Mankind's never had it as good as you and I have it right now tonight. 1899 was a national cold winter, the coldest winter in history, still today. And I show you this to tell you about Beaver Dam, Kentucky. 2 or 3 thermometers recorded 42 degrees below, and they were not official thermometers, so that record didn't hold. But can you imagine a day? I'll show you the coldest that I was ever out in. I love this. 1902, Owensboro had a sleet storm, didn't they? Now up here you had telephone lines, telegraph lines, and power lines. God knows. And I'm wondering what this guy right here is trying to salvage. You know, and here's the thing that worries me. I've worked on ladders, but this guy needs to have a foot on each one of those to keep it. Whew. So anyhow, I don't know what the rest of that story was, but Owensboro really got nailed. But so did New Harmony. When you had an ice storm up here, back in those days, I don't show the first telephone, you know, but the first telephone in the area was right here in New Harmony. Well, you had lines, maybe not like this, but you had lines, and when sleet came, it just rebuilt your lines. Low water. I love, this is 1904, and this is that St. Boniface? Do I have that right? The Catholic Church on the west side of Evansville? See it? Wrights High School is not up here because Wrights wasn't until 1917. But St. Boniface had they had a fire in 1891, burned the church down. They built a new one with higher steeples at that time. So this was Evansville, the riverfront, and you can see that here's Henderson. When you go out now, you don't see this. But back in the day, traffic would halt. This is high compared to some of those. And generally the low water came in all of the rivers, August, September, October were the bad weather months where traffic literally stopped because there was no water for those boats to go in. And again, people had to find means of drinking. And the Evansville River, when the Ohio drops down, the Wabash drops down as well. It goes down to where whatever Evansville's got in front of it, so's New Harmony going to have, and Vincennes. Rivers are dependent on the parent river, which was the governing river was Ohio, the Ohio. In 1905, Princeton had a 10.5-inch rainfall at 8 hours. A couple of years later, Evansville had a 10.5-inch rainfall, but it was over 2 days, and it wrecked the town. I can't imagine, you've seen heavier, you know what 2 inches does for you in an hour. If you got a basement, you got problems. So this was, I don't know how Princeton got through it, but this was a story up here where this was the headlines, Princeton vicinity visited by a flood, biggest, most destructive. You betcha, it surely was. That's an enormous rain. You're talking about this much rain. Now, Evansville, I think, is flatter than Princeton. I think Princeton has some hills, so that may be better here, and it may be worse there, depending on where on the hill or the valley you were when you got that 10.5 inch. That's just 8 hours is go to work time and come home time. I can't imagine, a school day. I can't imagine what that must have been like. Here was when they played, the river was low, and in 1908 they played a baseball game out from Evansville. Yeah, they really did. Carl K. Connect, I'll show you a little bit more. You remember Carl K. Connect? A lot of you do. He's kind of my hero of all time. The man was a giant. And the things, he was kind of like a grandmother to everybody. Don't do that. Don't drive drunk. Don't drive fast, Use a cane when you walk and things like that. And Carl Connect was always trying to improve mankind with his cartoon. But here was where they played, lost the ball in the sand, the umpire couldn't move. Here's another flood, 1913. The problem here was this flood wiped out Dayton, Ohio. The water really came from kind of like Springfield to Indianapolis. Picture about halfway up the states. Springfield, Indianapolis, Columbus, and it really socked to Dayton, where Dayton had 123 to die, and it just, whoom. It was, it just came on quickly and surprised everybody. When it got to Evansville, it was not quite all of that bad, although it was Evansville's second greatest flood. And New Harmony took part in that as well. See the gun, the cannon, that's now out. If you go to the pagoda in Evansville, this was a Civil War cannon, and a man had that on his steamboat. He carried the mail up and down during the Civil War. Lots of stories that guy had. The evil place was Uniontown. It was completely hardcore Confederate. But the captain of this little mail boat, he had two of these cannons, and that cannon was moved down to where the pagoda is. So if you go in where the museum is in Sunset Park, you'll see that cannon laid there. Isn't it funny how people want to walk? I have a similar picture of Henderson, and the people would do that. Notice how smooth the ice is. Notice that? It's okay until it starts breaking up. An interesting thing about the river, as long as the wind was blowing, and I'm talking about reasonable, I'm talking about below freezing and light wind. When the wind lays, the river goes snap. It gets icy. And what I noted was one of the frozen rivers, it took it 3 weeks of below zero, near zero temperatures, 3 weeks, and then it started to freeze. So that would happen here as well. The wind is an enemy to the ice and a friend to the humans. But this was, see the people walking across the river, no telling how many. This was at Owensboro. Another picture shows the Henderson Bridge, up the railroad bridge, and the people doing the same thing, walking across it. And I know you all have done that out here on the Wabash as well. This one was at least one time when the river was frozen to full length. That was from Cairo, Illinois, to way up past Pittsburgh. And I don't know how often that happened. There was a time back in the 1800s when the Mississippi was frozen to New Orleans. New Orleans actually saw ice on the Mississippi River. That just sounds like that's impossible, but it did happen. This was 1918 was really a bad year. You had the frozen river. You had all of this snow. They had a blizzard, and it was a double blizzard. You got about half of it today, and 3 days later, 4 days later, they got another half of it to where it was like this. This is Main Street in Evansville. What do? You just wait for a couple of months for that stuff to melt. They didn't have the trucks and blades we have today. This was long-term stuff back in those days with the blizzards. In 1918, on this day, and I don't remember which day it was, there was like 7 things went down the river in front of Evansville. This was a boat dock. This was a barn. There was a house went down. There were some other buildings. But somebody took pictures of these, maybe in the McCurdy, maybe from the shore. I don't know. I just thought I'd show those to you. The Great Tornado, March 18th, 1925. Who asked me what date it was? Somebody? Yes, no. There you go. March 18th. And this was terrible. This was the worst thing to ever hit, to do Griffin, to do Posey County, to do Indiana. It was so lethal. And they were helpless. In 1925, when it happened, the Wabash was in flood. And that was part of the problem. The help got to Griffin pretty quick, but they used railroad trains from Carmine to get to it. That was the first help they got, like 10 hours later. And these poor people up here at Griffin were just having to deal with it. And I can't imagine the horror stories. Some of you you have friends, you have relatives, you have ancestors that lived through some of this, and I know it was terrible. Absolutely unbelievably bad. I'm going to show you a few pictures as we go through it. There was 695 confirmed fatalities, and 71 people died in Indiana. And here we go with Mumford Hills again. I'm going to tell you the story. When a tornado came swooping, I guess it went this way, let's just say it did, the Wabash was in flood. And to add insult to injury, that tornado picked up all of this mud, and it deposited as it went on. So everything in Griffin was mud covered. The people, the houses, the streets, that just adds insult to injury as that happened. I wanted to tell you about that as we go through here. I'm convinced this was the most famous house in the world for a period of time. I have a couple of, and I have some of these are Working Men Institute pictures that I'm showing you. This one is not. This was National Archives. But it shows the devastation over here and this house. And there's a couple of pictures of that house. Do you know that house, they put it back up? They just rolled it over. There's a picture in the Evansville Courier, Evansville Journal, and I didn't bring it because I just thought I was limited for time. They just, boom, turned that house back up like a dollhouse and fixed the roof. It looks like it's made out of really strong wood. The construction must have been great on that house. Do any of you, and I'm going to run does anybody remember Marilyn Morris? I was showing this picture to my church. Marilyn is deceased. She died 3 or 4 years ago. And I said, this is a Kelly Vanaway girls. Marilyn said, that's Vanway, Harold. That's my cousins. So this was, and Marilyn lived here. That's where I think Marilyn grew up. Anyhow, this was her cousins, the Vanway girls. Just look at the destruction. All they've got is a front porch, the steps, for Pete's sake. And that's the way it was. These were the Red Cross workers at Griffin.